What's going on, guys? Francis here.
Hey there, Jean-Matt with Exalted Vigor Athletics, and today we're going to be talking about squatting. We're going to start off this video talking about common mistakes that people often do when they squat that involve you not opening up your hips, getting an ankle mobility, and then what happens when you fix those and how that allows you to actually squat with depth, comfortably and without pain.
Then we're going to go into the proper setup and how you can actually eliminate a lot of those mistakes that people make right from the get-go.
Yeah, from there we're going to go from variations from just a bodyweight squat with a box all the way to squatting with a barbell across your back with weight. Nothing too crazy, it's just going to be really back to basics, getting comfortable with squatting. So we're going to go ahead and start off talking with common mistakes that happen when you do squat. The first one is going to be placing of your feet. Foot placement should be directly in line with your shoulders. So that doesn't mean that you're coming hip width apart like when you deadlift, doesn't mean you're coming out too wide unless you're doing a wide squat. Wide squats are beneficial for reasons we'll talk about in another video, but for today's video we're just going to talk about a basic squat. So shoulder width apart.
Right, so next thing that we kind of commonly see are people that come onto their toes when they squat. So you really want all of that weight to be somewhere around the heel and no further than, I guess, the midfoot. You should be able to wiggle your toes while you're standing still. Obviously, you don't want to wiggle your toes while you squat. But essentially, when you come onto your toes, you are limiting your depth to a certain point until you come up off of your heels, which is terrible for your knees.
Yeah, really, really bad one. Really common with people that think that they can't get any deeper and then they just go straight forward on their toes. Another one is like, let's say when people start dropping their back, that's another one that starts having you one coming onto your toes, which is actually our next mistake. People actually dropping their back down too far down. So when you drop your back too far down, what happens is you turn the exercise into a good morning. You just load up all of your lower back, and then all of the weight that you had loaded across your back goes away from your legs and just gets placed straight here. And that is just a horror story for most people because there's plenty of people that have been injured because they do a squat incorrectly by dropping their back too far. Easiest thing to do is, if you can kind of get a kind of idea, is have your shins in line with your back. So your back isn't upright, it comes a bit down. It's not down with the floor, but it's just a little bent over just so it's comfortable. Yeah. Now our fourth one is going to be opening up your hips. So when you don't open up your hips, by that I mean you don't push your knees out when you squat, you restrict your hip mobility, and then you just squat and you come down and there's a sticking point. By pushing your knees in the direction of your toes, you're able to open up your hips and able to get a lot lower in a squat. So what happens is when you add this all up is that you can't get depth in your squat. You're limited by your ankles, you're limited by your hips, you're like, oh, well, my back's dropping too far down, is because you make all these compensations because your body just isn't mobile in that way. And it's all because you set up incorrectly in a squat. So you notice, you'll see how Francis goes and sets his feet shoulder width apart, turns his toes out a bit, not too much, just a little, just that way he can push his knees out in the direction of his toes. And you'll notice how his back is bent a bit forward, nothing crazy, just enough that he can get depth and that he can open up his hips and get that squat really nice. Alright, so next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and talk through squat variations. First one being a bodyweight box squat. So a bodyweight box squat is just literally going to be you squatting on a box. So if you'll notice, Francis is going to take a step a bit away from the box, about a foot, maybe a bit less from the box, just that way he can get enough away from the box so when he pushes his hips back, he actually hits the box. Because if his heels are right against the box, he might come too far back and his actual butt might not really be on the box. You go ahead. So you see how his butt touches the box, he comes down nice and easy. He's getting placement on the box, and there's nothing too crazy. He's really engaging his core when he's down and when he's up. He's not letting his core relax while he's squatting. Big important key right here. And then same thing, foot placement, knee position, hip opening up by your knees, is same exact thing. Nothing is changing about the mechanics of your squat. The only thing you're doing is you're adding a little aid for depth. So making sure when you have that box that you can get comfortable with how low you're squatting.
So next up, we're going to talk about the bodyweight squats. We're not going to need that anymore. So essentially, Jermaine's going to set up and show us what a bodyweight squat is going to look like. Again, heels are about shoulder width apart. Toes are about 15 to 30 degrees outward. And he's going to set up, sit back, and he's going to squat. So if you look, he's hitting depth, maybe even a little bit lower than that. His back is nice and straight. He's not caving at all. And he is breathing in on the way down, breathing out on the way up.
So now we're finally actually going to load up the squat. Today we're going to use a kettlebell. It's a goblet squat, so you can use a dumbbell, you can use a kettlebell. The nice thing about the kettlebell is that you can place your arms right by your side and get that kettlebell really close to your chest. There's nothing really strange about your wrist versus when you use a dumbbell. You hold it like this, and it can kind of be uncomfortable on your wrist depending on how heavy that dumbbell is. It's like the complete shape of the dumbbell. Some dumbbells aren't really conducive to doing a goblet squat, and some really are. So Francis is going to go ahead and pick up his kettlebell. He's going to set up for his squat just like every other squat we've done thus far. From here, he's going to keep that kettlebell close to his chest, and he's going to go ahead and sit back like he did with every other squat. Same exact movement, nothing's changed. It's just a kettlebell goblet squat. When I'm setting up for a back squat, I want to make sure I place that bar across my traps. So you don't want it on your neck because that's uncomfortable, and we're not doing a low bar squat, so we're not having it really low either. If you put it straight across your shoulders, it should rest straight down here. I have my arms pinching the bar as well, so that way I create a shelf with my back and my shoulders. That distributes the weight, so it makes having a barbell across your shoulders actually a much nicer experience.
Okay, so a couple things to note. First, Jermaine's going to approach the bar, and he's going to line his hands up evenly on either side of the smooth so that they are equidistant from the center. That way the bar is exactly on the center of his back and in line. When he unracks it, it's not going to tilt one way or the other. The other thing you noticed right before he unracked it is he pulled his shoulder blades back to create that shelf we're talking about. If you don't do this, then essentially you're going to be resting the bar on your neck or your spine in general, and it is going to hurt. A lot of people, when they complain about the bar hurting, it's simply because you're not retracting your scapula and you're not creating that shelf right on top of the traps that we mentioned earlier. So then he's going to take a small step out of the rack. We don't want to take a full large step out of the rack. We just want to take about a half step. So now we got the box under Jermaine, and he is ready to squat. So again, he is going to sit back and allow his glutes to touch the box. His glutes are flexed the entire time though, so he is squeezing his glutes. He is not relaxing at the bottom when he sits on the box, and he is not sitting on the box for an extremely long amount of time, right? Less than a second, and he's back up.